What's going on, everybody? Welcome back. Episode 3 of the First Team Fantasy Podcast. Today we're going over our Monday night games, the waiver wire, and also injury news to look forward to going into week 4. Schiff, you want to start it off with the Eagles Bucs game?
Yeah, the Eagles went into Tampa Bay and won 25-11. Jalen Hurts didn't really look his best in this one. He ended up throwing 2 interceptions, and they missed a lot of. They choked in the red zone a few times. Their first 2 drives, I think, they turned it over in the red zone, and then they kicked a field goal. Which, as a person who has a lot of Eagles on a lot of his fantasy teams, it was fairly disappointing. But Jalen Hurts still gave you a good day, 21.8 fantasy points because he ended up getting that rushing touchdown. Through 23 for 37, 277 yards and a touchdown. He had those 2 interceptions, which kind of hurt if you were a Jalen Hurts owner this week, but he still kind of got it done. DeAndre Swift is looking like the main guy in this backfield. He got 16 carries and Kenny Gainwell got 14. With his 16, DeAndre Swift got 130 yards. Gainwell got 43 with his 14. It's going to be a, split backfield to a degree, but I think we're definitely seeing the skill is going to get DeAndre Swift the volume that we want him to. So if you have DeAndre Swift, it's looking really nice for the lookout for the rest of the season. If you have Gainwell, hold on to him just in case anything happens. And we also know how the Eagles like to switch running backs they'll give Swift a drive, give Gainwell a drive, and Gainwell might end up getting a touchdown on his drive. So just guys on very high-powered offenses, and if they're in a backfield like that, they're worth holding on to. Moving on to the receivers, A.J. Brown had 2 touchdowns slip through his hands, and having A.J. Brown on a lot of my fantasy teams and also having taken the A.J. Brown anytime touchdown, that one hit me right in the core. So that hurt a little. But as far as fantasy, he still got it done at a high level. He got 14 targets today. We kind of figured, we don't know exactly what went on that sideline, but might be a squeaky wheel game for A.J. Brown. It was a squeaky wheel game for A.J. Brown. 9 catches, 131 yards. Unfortunately, didn't get those touchdowns, but finished with 22.1 fantasy points. So you love to see that. Devontae Smith, as we know, it's kind of like Tyler Lockett. They're very good receivers, but sometimes the targets are going to go the other way. And the last 2 weeks, we saw Devontae get those touchdowns and be the one who finished with the really high fantasy score from the Eagles receiving room. This week, it was A.J. Brown. And unfortunately, the receiving touchdown went to Olamide Zaccheaus. So none of us liked that at all, except for A.J. Brown owners, because, you get the passing touchdown. But, if you had Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, A.J. Brown, you weren't very happy with that. And on Goedert, he had, pretty decent day. 5 catches, 7 targets, 41 yards. He's going to give you hopefully solid weeks around 9-10 points, someone that you should be able to count on because, like I said, they're in a high-powered offense, should have a lot of opportunities to score. The Eagles' defense probably gave you a pretty nice outing. They got a safety, and they got a few sacks. They got to Baker a few times. They got the interception. So they gave you a pretty nice outing. And Jake Elliott kicked 3 field goals. So as far as the Eagles, that's about it. You know how they're going to do. Even if Jalen Hurts isn't at his peak performance, the rest of the team is good enough that they're still probably going to be winning games.
Yeah, and to touch on Jalen Hurts, he's having, fantasy-wise, a pretty solid start to the year. He's the QB6. He was being drafted anywhere from QB1 to 3. But, with the Eagles' offense, you're going to see him maintain that, if not increase that. Something to monitor this year, he already does have 3 interceptions. I believe he finished last year with 6 altogether. So the turnovers are a little bit higher, but fantasy-wise, that doesn't hurt you too much as long as he's still getting the rushing touchdowns, the rush yards, and whatever passing touchdowns he's getting. DeAndre Swift, clear as day, the lead back. I don't know what happened week 1 where he just did not play, but
I think week 1 was more they just knew Kenny Gainwell. He'd been working for that position, so they gave him a shot, and then he got hurt. So
Yeah, he
it's just
got
how the
hurt,
story goes.
and now it is definitely Swift's backfield. The receiving room, as Schiff mentioned, AJ Brown. After last week, we all knew he was going to get forced those targets. He took full advantage of them, other than getting in the end zone. But he did have a very solid game. AJ Brown's that one tier one receiver that he's going to have those super good weeks, and then he is going to have those random weeks where he's getting, 4 catches for 35 yards, but the Eagles win by 20.
Yeah.
And it's kind of weird to see, but A.J. Brown, I mean, he's a tier one receiver without question. Devonta Smith,
Yeah, he's got 30 targets in the first 3 weeks, so if a guy's averaging 10 targets a game.
Yeah. Devonta Smith's always going to play that secondary role. He's going to have those really good weeks, but then, when AJ's really popping off and he's the hot hand, Devonta's going to take the back seat. For Goddard, the tight end position, I mean, 9 fantasy points for tight ends at this point is a solid week. You're seeing a lot of tight ends finish below that each week, so I mean, nothing to complain too much about, but also where he was being drafted in fantasy drafts is where you're kind of, hoping you get more than that, but we'll see as the season goes on. I wouldn't be worried about Goddard either. The Bucs, like we said in the last episode, this was the test for them. They played a really tough Eagles defense, and, they really couldn't get too much going on offense. Baker Mayfield finished 15 of 25, 146 yards, a touchdown, an interception, 11 fantasy points. I mean, obviously he wasn't a guy you were thinking about starting. I don't even think he's a guy you really consider starting any week unless it's a very, very favorable matchup, but even then.
Yeah.
Rachaad White, 14 carries, 38 yards. And that's something we've seen from the Bucs backfield, is inability to run the ball efficiently, and it continued this game. Rachaad White played 91% of the snaps. He is, if you have Rachaad White, you have to play him just because he is the only back in Tampa. Had 3
it's
catches.
One of those ones where it's like you play the Eagles defense and you play the Niners defense. You're still starting your running back just in that off chance that they fall into the end zone, but you have to be prepared for a low scoring week playing one of those defenses.
Yeah, and Rachaad White had his chance. 3 catches, 24 yards, finished with 7.2 fantasy points. Kind of late in the game, 1 yard line. Rachaad White had the chance to get in the end zone.
Oh, no.
And did not.
Where he dived at the 1 yard line.
Yeah,
his lineman's feet.
Fell at the 1 yard line. Would have finished with 13.2 fantasy points instead of 7. And then the very next play, Mike Evans gets the touchdown catch. He finished 5 catches, 60 yards with that touchdown on 10 targets. Finished with 17 points. And if you're like me...
It was a very heartbreaking sequence for one of us.
Yeah, you're like me. I lose my fantasy week this week because of that. If Rachaad had got into the end zone and Mike Evans did not there, I would have won. But it's the opposite way around. Rachaad White pissed at you, still starting you. But Mike Evans owners, I'm sure you were very happy to see it. So... without the touchdown, Mike Evans finishes 11, still a decent week. With it, he finishes 17, so I mean a very good week for Mike Evans. And we've kind of seen Baker's favorite target is Mike over Chris Godwin.
Easy.
Godwin finished 3 catches, 32 yards on 5 targets. He finished 8.2 fantasy points, and that's because he got a 2-point conversion. Otherwise, he would have finished 6.2. So, I mean, even 8 points from Godwin, you're kind of like, it wasn't a great week from him by any means. It wasn't terrible, but I mean, you can see that Evans is the clear ahead favorite there.
Yeah, Godwin is like not the guy. Honestly, throughout the whole draft season, doing mock drafts, doing underdog, Godwin was getting taken
before Mike
Evans. And for me, it was kind of weird because it's like Mike Evans hasn't given us a season under 1,000 yards in his whole entire career. his play style fits Baker's play style. He's a big body receiver, like we saw in the game last night when he went up and got that one-handed catch. He's a big body guy who can go up. Granted, last night he dropped some. He had 10 targets and only 5 catches. It was rainy, whatever.
Mhm.
He got 10 targets, and he has the ability to make the catch. Like, Baker can put the ball damn near anywhere, and Mike Evans can go get it. He can throw it down the field and just put it somewhere and count on Mike. And Chris Godwin doesn't have that same play style, especially after his injury. He's not as explosive. He's like more around the middle, the like mid-range to shallow routes. And we thought Baker, like, oh, he's going to be checking down, but Baker loves to go deep.
Yeah, absolutely. And last guy on Tampa, and it was a very disappointing week. K. Dotton, the Eagles' worst team defensive wise against tight ends coming into this week, had a catch very early for 16 yards that we were all pretty excited about, and then the rest of the game he got one more target. He finished
That he dropped, and they didn't go to him
yeah,
ever again the rest
yeah.
of that game.
And, he played 91% of snaps. He's obviously the lead tight end there. But finishing 2.6 fantasy points against an Eagles defense that is terrible against tight ends, I mean, it's tough. If you gave K. Dotton the start this week, and, I mean, we thought he was going to have a solid week, but
Yeah,
he
and
did
there's a
not.
league I started him in. He just didn't get it done. But I mean, you like seeing your tight end be on the field for over 80% of snaps. 90, that's great.
Hmm.
They're gonna have better weeks. To me, what I was seeing in this game was for the Eagles defense, they gave up, they almost gave up the comeback to the Patriots. And then they do the same thing the next week against the Vikings. To me, this week was a get right game for the Eagles defense. And they came out, they played lights out. Their run defense was great. They were making plays on the defensive end. They picked off Baker. Baker hadn't been picked off this year yet.
Hmm.
So it was just all around get right game for the Eagles defense. And hell, that's tough when the team that goes to the Super Bowl last year comes out with a fire lit under them.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I mean, that's all I had if you want to segue us into the Rams-Bengals game.
Yeah, this one was a little boring, honestly.
Yes.
From the Super Bowl matchup that we saw, was that 2 years ago, the Rams Bengals. Yeah, this I mean, we knew Joe Burrow wasn't exactly right, and he didn't necessarily look like it. Matt Stafford, I honestly thought I was gonna get a little more out of the Rams offense, but it was a really just ugly back and forth game. I don't know. The offenses just seemed really. The defenses were pretty on point in that game. Stafford was 18 for 33, 269, a touchdown and 2 picks. One of those picks was very questionable. A sidearm rocket straight to the other team.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, okay. And Stafford, I've been talking you up this year. I mean, I don't know. Like, the Bengals are another team playing with that defense, playing with a fire lit under them, because obviously they know they got to pick up some slack for the offense with their hurt quarterback. And damn, they came out. I think they got 6 sacks.
Yep.
They picked off Matt Stafford twice. They were on fire. Kyron Williams, the guy we talked about trading high. Again, I think the first 2 weeks had, I don't know how many rushing attempts he had, but he had finished with 52 yards in both weeks. This week, 10 attempts for 38 yards. And he didn't get any of those touchdowns like we were talking about. When these guys who don't necessarily put up the best stats without touchdowns finish without them, they're going to have a mediocre week. And he scored 8.5 fantasy points, which, hey, it's better than you're getting out of Breece Hall and Dalvin Cook on most weeks. So you're not mad about it. And the opportunity's there, but that is the reality. That is we're seeing the floor now. We've seen the ceiling, and now we're seeing the floor. What happens when the Rams aren't consistently moving the ball, when they're having 3 and outs. And Puka Nacua was still solid. He gave you 12.2 fantasy points. He had 7 targets, which is not what we've been seeing. But again, what we were saying about trading guys high is when you have 35 targets through 2 weeks. I'm not saying that's not going to happen again, but the chances are he's not immediately going to get 20 targets in the next game, and it didn't happen. So, if you were able to go out and trade Puka for like an AJ Brown or someone of that caliber, great on you. If not, then, this is to me, this is kind of the game that we might be seeing out of Puka once Cooper Kupp gets back,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
still good, still great, especially for a receiver that you picked up on the waiver wire. It's still great, but it's not going to be a world beater like the first 2 weeks are. And that's just the reality of it.
Mm-hmm.
But he's still a great wide receiver, still starting him like every week. Tyler Higbee showed up this week. He got 5 catches on his 5 targets for 71 yards. He was kind of the guy. Those targets that were all going to Puka kind of got spread out a little more this game. And Tyler Higbee got his done, kind of what I thought he'd be doing through the first 2 weeks. But, I've moved on from him. But he is a viable option now, we're seeing, if you want to move towards him as a tight end. My guy Tutu Atwell is one that I have on my bench, and I'm going to keep. If you have him, keep him rostered, just because he's such a good gadget guy.
Yep.
Like they get him in on runs. He got a 22-yard run, which should have been a touchdown, but debatable. And he got 9 targets. He had the most targets on the Rams this game because he's got, it's the low ADOT, low depth of target, but he's fast, so he can get it done. Dump it off, and he can get 10 yards real quick. And he's like their little scheme guy. And on that touchdown they scored, he ran a motion, and as no one really followed him. So as the ball was snapped, he's wide open in the end zone for like a little 3-yard out. And that's the type of things we can continue seeing from Tutu Atwell, in my opinion, especially if this Rams offense is going to be good moving forward. Not an every week start, especially someone that needs to be monitored more once Cooper Kupp gets back, but not a guy that I'm dropping. I mean, he has not scored under 10 fantasy points yet. So I like this Rams offense. Moving forward, I do like this Rams offense, and that's really about all I have for them.
Yeah, like you said, Kyron Williams, we said to sell him high because, touchdowns aren't what Schiff likes to say is a sticky stat. Those touchdowns are going to come and go. And when he's not getting them, I mean, yeah, this could have been his floor we saw this week. When Cooper Kupp comes back, maybe it helps Kyron Williams because they're going to be even more worried about the pass game, but also maybe not because we know Matt Stafford likes to throw the ball. They've had capable running backs that did not get used before because of, just being able to get the ball to Cooper Kupp. Kyron Williams, obviously a guy you're probably starting every week only because of his volume. He doesn't really have competition there with Cam Akers leaving. Puka Nacua had a solid game. Shout out Puka Nacua. He hit my parlay for this week on that very last deep ball. But I want to say that deep ball at the end, that was like 35, 40 yards. So I'm just saying that's one of those things where if you take that play away, how much fantasy points does he finish with? Single digits, no?
Yeah, I think you take away a catch and like 35 yards, like 6 point something.
Yeah, and I mean, and he made the catch.
I don't know how many yards that.
Yeah, he made the catch.
He made the catch. He won on the route. He, like I said, targets are earned.
Yeah,
that was a target he earned, and damn, he almost fell into the end zone.
That would have been huge.
Obviously, given him a much bigger week. I'm glad he didn't because Tutu got the touchdown. But
yeah, so I mean,
that's personal.
And I think this was the first week. You can almost say coming into the first 2 weeks, there's no way teams were game planning for a guy like Puka Nacua to come out there and explode like he did. And whether it's the Bengals defense, I mean, they desperately needed the win, but the Bengals secondary especially is not the greatest. But they came out and they didn't minimize Puka, but they also did in comparison to the first 2 games. You saw that teams can start scheming for him to shut him down, and then you start seeing Tyler Higbee's targets, catches kind of spike up, Tutu Atwell being used. But yeah, like Schiff said, it was a game that overall I thought the game was going to be more high scoring than it was.
Yeah.
We expected more from Stafford, and I mean that segues me right into the Bengals. As a Burrow and T Higgins owner, I, I don't even know what to say about him. You come in, you hear Joe Burrow's got a little bit of a lingering injury, but you're like, this is Joe Burrow. I'm not going to be worried about him. This is the Bengals offense. They're super high powered. And I mean, they just have not been. They squeaked out this win. I mean, they deserved it. They were winning most of the game, but they squeaked this thing out. I mean, Joe Burrow 26 completions, 49 attempts, 259 yards, 0 touchdowns again, 1 interception, 9.16 fantasy points. Joe Burrow owners, you drafted him so early and that offense is so good, you almost can't not start him. You're in this weird situation where it's how can I bench Joe Burrow at this point and look at the waiver wire and it's I'm just Daniel Jones, Dak Prescott, Brock Purdy, guys like that. I just don't see how you can I don't see how you can bench Burrow. At least for myself, I'm in that situation. You keep kicking the tires on Burrow and just praying that one week he is going to wake up. Um, Joe
Yeah, I
Mixon,
think we're seeing that calf injury is affecting mm, a lot more than, I don't know if like more than they want to let on, but he's not able to do a lot. He can't really, he's not mobile. And a lot of, he's able to kind of move around in the pocket last year, escape sacks, let his guys get open. This year, we're seeing a lot of, he's forcing throws and missing a lot more because he doesn't have the time to create. And that's having a big effect. Joe Burrow's not a running quarterback by any means, but it's more along the lines of, not, you wouldn't really consider Mahomes that. But when you take away their ability to create plays and give their great receivers time to get open, I mean, yeah, it's going to hurt you when the ball hits T. Higgins in the hands and he can't catch it.
mm-hmm.
But still, there's like been a lot more plays like the sideline throws that you're seeing him just completely miss out of bounds over his receivers' heads that you didn't really see last year, the year before that. And yeah, it's concerning. But you are going to be kicking yourself if you bench Joe Burrow one week
Yeah,
for Dak Prescott, and that's the week that they finally decide. Because you're seeing it, it's going to come. With Jamar Chase, finally, it came. With T. Higgins, it was there last week, and it's not just going to be gone for the rest of the season.
yeah, and like Schiff said, that receiving room, the only one with real success this week was Jamar Chase. Everyone was waiting for that game where he kind of exploded, and that was this game. He finished 12 catches, 141 yards on 15 targets, 26.1 fantasy points. I mean, when you score 26 fantasy points without a touchdown, that is a great week for you.
It's called
Um,
getting it done.
Absolutely. And he had to because T. Higgins finished 2 catches, 21 yards on 8 targets for 4.1 fantasy points. Another tough week for T. Higgins. Um,
Yeah.
we saw him leave momentarily with an injury, and he did come right back. He played 86% of the snaps. Haven't heard more about it, so I want to assume T. Higgins is fine going into week 4. But it is something to look
Yeah.
out for that he did leave momentarily for something. Um, Tyler Boyd, 5 catches, 39 yards, 9 targets, 8.9 fantasy points. I mean, a 5 catch, 39 yard day for Tyler Boyd sounds about right. I mean, he's never if T
Yeah.
Higgins or Jamar Chase miss a week, that's where you see Tyler Boyd have these random monster games. But if Higgins and Jamar are playing and healthy, Tyler Boyd's a guy that you maybe keep rostered, but especially with Burrow throwing the ball the way he is right now, I'm not starting Tyler Boyd by any means. Um, they were missing Irv Smith, so we saw a weird mixture of Hudson and Wilcox, and Burrow was getting them the ball a couple times. None of these guys are, even Irv Smith really isn't worth even
No.
rostering at this point. So, I mean, just mentioned it because they did get a lot of run. And Joe Mixon had a I mean, kind of a quieter Joe Mixon game. He had 19 carries for 65 yards, so not that efficient running the ball. He did get the touchdown. He only had 1 catch for 5 yards. I without P. Ryan this year, we've seen Joe Mixon kind of get an up spike in catches out the backfield. We didn't see it this game. He played 75% of the snaps, finished 14 fantasy points even. I mean, a solid week for Joe Mixon.
Yeah, and he's going to go as the Bengals offense goes. So, I mean, week 1, they scored 3 points,
Mm-hmm.
and he finishes with 10.3 fantasy points. Week 2, I don't remember how much they scored. They ended up losing to us, but he got 13.5. They're still
Mm-hmm.
not scoring that many points in that game. This week, they score 19. He finishes with 14. He's going to go as the Bengals go. If the Bengals start scoring a lot more points, Joe Mixon will start scoring a lot more points because it gives him more opportunity at the goal line.
Mm-hmm.
And it gives him more, like, the more they stay on the field, as we say, the less 3 and outs there are, the more opportunities you guys have to put up fantasy points. And the fact that he hasn't scored under 10 yet and they haven't really picked it up yet, I like to see that out of Joe Mixon. It's someone, like, if you can trade, like, buy him kind of low because they're not doing too much right now. People are like having questions about the Bengals offense. I mean, he got 13, 13, 19 carries, 5 targets, 2, and they haven't started scoring yet. So Joe Mixon, definitely somebody, if I could buy low, I will. And if you have him, just hold on. It's coming. He's going to
Mm-hmm.
get those 20-point weeks.
Yeah,
Trust.
absolutely. I mean, that's all I had for the Bengals game. If you want to segue us into our waiver wire
Yeah.
pickups.
And this is also, like, it's a fairly important week, in my opinion, because there are some, not really on, I mean, okay, obviously the big one is Devin. It's apparently Achan, not Devin A. Chain. He said it's Devin Achan for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
So he's going to be the big guy. Everybody's going to be going for him if they paid any attention this week. Obviously, he scored 51 points using the Miami defense or Miami offense that scored 70 points. We see what they're capable of, not scoring 70 every week, but clearly they're going to put up more than 3 touchdowns a week. And if you got the number 1 waiver priority, if you have the fab to spend on him, go get him, because we're at the time where the guys who are going to be relevant are going to start disappearing, especially in the running back position, because guys are getting hurt every week. I mean, I think right now Jerome Ford is running back 11, if that tells you anything. The
Mm-hmm.
running back frontier right now, it's ugly. So yeah, if you have the opportunity to go out and get a Chan, spend what you have to. If you have the number 1 priority, go get him. Some other guys I want to talk about are McKinnon and Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Not necessarily guys I'm super excited about, but the running back room in Kansas City is one that, we saw Clyde get, I think he had 7 total carries in the first 2 weeks. This week, he got 55 yards on 15 carries and a touchdown.
Mm-hmm.
So he only got 3 less carries than Isaiah Pacheco. McKinnon's going to be the gadget back. When they get in the red zone, he's the guy that might get the touchdown sometimes. These are just guys to pay attention to because they're in that high-powered offense that I like to talk about. And if you're starting guys like Khalil Herbert, and I like Roshan Johnson, I like the talent profile, but they're not going to have much opportunity and they're always off the field because they can't move the ball. I at least want somebody who's going to give me a chance to score some points,
Yep.
which, as we saw, Clyde and McKinnon, they can do. So if you're struggling at running back, you really need someone, take a look at those guys.
Would you say
Other than
you'd like McKinnon more than Hilaire if you're picking up PPR?
I do like McKinnon more than Hilaire. He only had 2 carries, but like I said, they've shown even through last year, they like using him around the goal line.
Yep.
He's fast and he fits their schemes and their little quick hit plays they like to do,
Mm-hmm.
which, like we said, touchdowns are not something you can rely on every week, but a touchdown from a Kansas City Chiefs running back is a lot easier to count on than a touchdown from Chicago Bears running back.
Any Chicago
So
Bears player, for that fact.
yeah, honestly. Then I got Zeke. Zeke through the first 2 weeks, everybody thought like he's starting to get, Mondre's getting his Mondre working, and Zeke's not going to be a threat. Like it's looking like okay, they just signed him to be a good backup. Well, this week Zeke got 16 carries for 80 yards, and Zeke is a very good downhill runner. We all know that, and I think in games where the Patriots are I think they won 15-10. So it was close a lot of the time. They had to lead a lot of the time, and they have trouble passing the ball. And like you said earlier in the week, Mondre said he did not want the workload that he got last year.
And
So
it's
Zeke,
showing.
exactly. And if they're willing to give Zeke 16 carries, he's definitely somebody worth a bench spot. Because if Mondre ever were to go down, I think they have, because they don't have Pierre Strong anymore. He's on the Browns. It's Ty Montgomery.
Ty Montgomery, yeah.
I mean, that tells you all you need to know.
Mm-hmm.
Then I got Elijah Mitchell. We saw his workload increase this week, as it probably will a little bit. He's going to spell McCaffrey because they want to keep McCaffrey healthy. And like I said, another running back in a good offense. And if McCaffrey ever were to go down, Elijah Mitchell is going to be a number one running back in one of the best offenses in the league. So maybe not someone you could start right away, but definitely somebody worth a bench spot. Like I said, if McCaffrey were to go down, and if not, he's somebody who's starting to get more work in a very good offense. My last one is Melvin Gordon. Nasty, I know. But and it honestly, it is just something, because we're seeing injuries in this running back Ravens room, or Ravens running back room, like we are every year. Already lost J.K. Dobbins. Last week, Justice Hill's out with a foot injury. This week, Gus Edwards has a concussion. I don't know if Justice and Gus are going to go. If they don't, we saw Melvin Gordon get a large percentage of that work with him out. He ended up with 10 carries, 32 yards, not that great. 2 catches for 23 yards once Gus went out in that game. So, the Ravens are going to run the ball. And if they happen to get near the goal line, he might fall in. Not excited about him at all, but like I said, we all know what this running back room in general is looking like. We know how many guys have gone down. You can't be so irresponsible that if a guy, just because you don't like him, if you need a running back, you just got to pick someone up. You got to roster someone. So these are guys, unfortunately, to look at.
Yeah.
It's nasty, I know.
Yeah. And just to add one more player to that, just to keep an eye on, is Tyjae Spears. I know we've been talking about him. It's obviously Derrick Henry's backfield, but one, Derrick Henry has not looked like Derrick Henry at all. The Titans' offense has just been horrendous. If Derrick Henry does happen to miss time, Tyjae Spears is a guy to keep an eye on. The first 3 weeks, his snap count was 54% week 1, 37% week 2, 56% week 3. So when the Titans go down and they're needing to pass, you're seeing Tyjae Spears out there. And when you're thinking about Derrick Henry in 2 of 3 games not playing 50% of the snaps, I mean, that is a crazy thing to think about. So just worth keeping an eye on in case Derrick Henry does happen to miss any time this season.
Definitely, yeah. And just to add on to that, Derrick Henry did not get a target in their last game, and Tyjae Spears had 4 targets, 4 catches.
Mm-hmm.
So it's moving in a direction that definitely needs to be monitored.
Yeah.
Moving on to the wide receivers, I wanted to kick it off with Josh Downs. The Colts are looking better, another team that's looking better than a lot of us thought. And Anthony Richardson's a good passer. He's a guy that, in my opinion, can get it done. But Josh Downs even looked good with Gardner Minshew out there. He played 80% of snaps, got 12 targets, and the Colts weren't missing any pass catchers. So it's not like, oh, Michael Pittman was out, so that's why Josh Downs. Nope, they're low depth targets, but he's there and he's fast. So, they get the ball to him. He caught 8 of those 12 targets for 57 yards, finished with 13.7 points. And that it's when you have a guy getting 12 targets playing 80% of snaps,
It's a
that's
good sign.
definitely someone that you got it at least, worth picking up, put in a $0 claim, whatever you happen to get him, then he's just someone that can provide value.
Mm-hmm.
KJ Osborne, my next guy, who everybody right now is enamored with the rookie Jordan Addison, with good reason. He got 8 targets last game. He's gotten touchdowns so far this season. But KJ Osborne is the guy that's been there, and he might start getting worked out a little bit, but this is an offense that, like I said, is very good and is capable of moving the ball, and they're going to rotate guys, keep him on the field. He was on the field for 93% of the snaps. So it's not like, he's not out there. He only got 3 targets, caught one of them for a 36-yard touchdown. So that got it done. But again, it's like, this is one of those guys where, do I want to roster a Rashid Shaheed, or do I want to roster KJ Osborne? Do I want to roster an Allen Robinson, or do I want to roster a KJ Osborne?
Yep.
These are the type of questions we got to start asking ourselves, because it's like, you want to hold on to some guys that you might think are good, but you have to look towards the guys who are playing more and better offenses. And KJ Osborne happens to be one of those guys,
Mm-hmm.
which goes to my next one, Josh Palmer. And that one is probably the most important aside from Devon Achane this week, because Mike Williams just, he's done for the season with an ACL injury. So we saw Josh Palmer, after Mike Williams went out, came in and got that touchdown. And it's being said that he's going to be the guy that steps into that role. It could end up being Quentin Johnston throughout the year, but right now it's going to be Josh Palmer. So right now, the guy I'm looking at for playing right now is Josh Palmer. He ended up playing 61% of those snaps. Mostly came when Mike Williams went out, but that's good because he's not going to be playing now. He got 7 targets, caught 4 of them for 66 yards, and that touchdown, finished with 14.6 fantasy points. In my opinion, outside of Achane, this is the top receiver waiver ad of the week. The number 2 overall. And if you have that opportunity, like, he's one guy I wouldn't mind spending, like, say you have $200 fab for the year. I wouldn't mind spending like 25, 30 on Josh Palmer. Even if you're hurting at receiver, maybe even more than that, because he's a guy who's going to be right now in 2 wide receiver sets on a team that just threw for 400 yards and 3 touchdowns. Okay, they're not going to play the Vikings every week, but the Chargers are high-powered. And as long as Austin Eckler's missing, they can't run the ball with Josh Kelly at all. So those targets are going to be there. Josh Palmer's value, I mean, I'm not calling him, the Puka Nacua or anything, but this is the next guy. Then probably, one of the guys that could end up being a league winner type.
Yeah.
Just due to the offense he's in and the role he's going to be in now.
Yeah, and if you're a Quentin Johnston believer over a Josh Palmer long term, and you want to pass on Josh Palmer and Quentin Johnston is there on the waiver also, you could probably get him a bit cheaper than Josh Palmer at this point, and I feel like that is also worth taking the risk on. They drafted Quentin Johnston super high. You would assume at some point,
wide receiver,
especially with Mike Williams being gone, you would assume Quentin Johnston is going to start. I mean, I think he's played less than 30. He's played 27% of snaps, 15 and 24. I promise you that's at least going to be up over 35-40% going forward. So, another Chargers receiver to look for.
Worth a roster spot. And other than that, I mean, my last 2 I don't want to talk too much on because they are not the most reliable, but Nelson Aguilar, because at the end of this game, Rashad Bateman went down. Didn't really know what happened. I don't yet know the details. I saw him tweet today that he's fine, but we've seen players do that all the time and still miss multiple weeks.
Hmm.
So we'll continue to monitor that. That's only someone that because he ended up playing, his snaps jumped up from the 30s. He played 72% of snaps last week with Odell Beckham out. In my opinion, he's it's like Mark Andrews and Zay Flowers. And then with Odell out, Nelson Aguilar is that next guy.
Yeah.
Which, you know, you could say what you want about it. The Ravens aren't the highest passing volume team, but he's someone, especially in deeper leagues, someone who might be a little bit viable. But like I said, I don't want to talk too much on that. And then Calvin Austin is the other one. Don't want to speak too much because I don't like the Steelers offense that much, but he showed against the Raiders that he has that speed that can take the top off the defense, and they're willing to throw that deep ball. He's kind of taking over for Allen Robinson. He finished the game with 6 targets, only caught 2 of them for 72 yards and a touchdown. So deeper leagues, someone to keep an eye on, or someone maybe to stash. And if you're more shallow leagues, maybe just keep an eye on him. I wouldn't roster him. That's all I really got for the receivers. If you have anyone else.
I mean, I had DJ Chark wrote down. Josh Reynolds was playing somewhat injured, didn't get any targets. DJ Chark had 4 catches, 86 yards, a touchdown on 11 targets. He had a really good week, finishing 18.6 fantasy points. I mean, worth mentioning because he had a really good week. But again, if Josh Reynolds comes back healthy next week, when Jamison Williams comes back week 7, I don't know. But for the next couple weeks, I mean, if you can pick him up for free off the waiver wire, possibly worth doing. But just thought I would throw him in there as well.
Yeah, I like DJ Chark just because especially if Andy Dalton is going to be playing quarterback there.
Yeah.
I don't know how long Bryce Young's going to be out, but they threw the ball a whole bunch. And also Jonathan Mingo is going to be out with concussion. So that should ramp up his production. And then for tight ends, I only got a couple. Luke Musgrave, a guy I posted about, he's the tight end 9 right now without a touchdown, which is something you like to see because touchdown probably going to come. But he's playing 86% of the snaps. He got 8 targets last week as a rookie tight end, and that's something you like to see. Like when they're working in the rookie tight ends this early, like he's almost a guy that I'm looking at more than like Dalton Kincaid, just due to the fact that there is no other like tight end taking away. Like Kincaid and Knox are playing like 50% of the snaps each, and Musgrave's out there for 86%. Finished with 10.9 fantasy points. Like I said, he hasn't yet got a touchdown. He's the tight end 9, ahead of Pat Fryermuth, who has 2 touchdowns.
Yeah.
So, and then Noah Fant, playing 63% of snaps. He's kind of got it done for the tight end position the last 2 weeks. Finished with a dud week 1, which the Seahawks did not play well week 1, if anybody can recall that against the Rams. As this offense ramps up, he might be someone they look to more. Not the most reliable option, especially because they like to spread the ball out to like Colby Parkinson and who's the other one there? Will Dissly.
Will Dissly, yeah.
Dissly. So just a guy to look at, just because his production is ramping up, and if that Seahawks offense is what we want it to be, then it's another guy in a good offense.
Yeah.
And then my quarterbacks for this week, I know, guys. I know. But Russell Wilson at Chicago. I know. But the Broncos offense looks better than last year. Chicago's defense, yes, they played Kansas City. Yes, Kansas City's miles better than Denver. But I mean, if anything, maybe we can see the Bears offense move the ball and score some points, so the Broncos will have to throw the ball even more. That I just don't like the Bears defense. I don't think they provide a challenge, I think, with the receivers that he has. Jerry Jeudy healthy now. Cortland Sutton healthy. Marvin Mims is looking good. He's
Mm-hmm.
fast. And the opportunity is there
Yeah.
compared to some other matchups this week. And my other one is Geno at the Giants. I don't think too much of the Giants' pass defense. They have a fairly decent pass rush, but just with the weapons on any given week, Geno's a guy that I think can get it done. And, especially playing the Giants, I think that he'll have a pretty good finish this week.
Yeah, and Gino is a guy who had a monster year last year. And I mean, he's been solid to start this year, but he hasn't been what we saw last year from Gino. And like you said, I think this could be the week that, Gino gets 3 touchdowns or something like that through the air, gets back on track. And I mean, yeah, I definitely
Yeah.
like it. It's a favorable matchup for him for sure.
And we've seen DK banged up this year. Jackson Smith and Jigba is still ramping up. Like, I think this offense will kind of start to get into its rhythm. They scored, 37 points last week?
Correct, yeah.
So I think it's going to come.
Yeah.
And then for the defenses, I hate to say it because they're divisional rivals, but Cincinnati and Pittsburgh both have very good matchups this week. Cincinnati's playing at Tennessee. We saw what any pass rush does to the Tennessee Titans, and we just saw the Cincinnati Bengals get 6 sacks last night.
Yeah.
So you put those two together, I think that and Tannehill can't pass.
No.
So the Bengals run defense is fairly good. They held Williams to obviously Kyron Williams is not Derrick Henry, but Derrick Henry hasn't been looking like Derrick Henry either. So that's a matchup I really like. And then Pittsburgh plays at Houston. Yes, we saw Houston dismantle Jacksonville, but at the same time, their offensive line is not very good, and the Steelers' defensive line is very good. So you are going to see a lot of sacks in that one, in my opinion. Maybe some other turnovers. But those are the two defenses that I'm looking at for streaming this week. For the kickers, I got Matt Gay versus the Rams. I mean, it's hard not to look at a guy to stream who kicks 4 50-yard field goals in a game just because we know if they have the opportunity to kick 50-yarder, they're going to put Matt Gay out there and kick.
Yep, they're going to do it.
And then Dustin Hopkins versus Baltimore. I think, unfortunately, the Browns are going to get a lot of decent field position. And Deshaun Watson hasn't looked the best this year. So I think they might stumble in the red zone a few times, ending up in some Dustin Hopkins field goals.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as like guys to pick up this week, that's about it. If there's still guys like Adam Thielen on your waiver wire, which at this point there probably shouldn't be. Obviously, go get them. Guys like Tutu Atwell, go get them. But these are guys rostered over like 60%, so I didn't really want to talk about them due to the chance that they're probably not there.
Yeah.
But the next thing that we wanted to talk about is guys that at this point you can go ahead and drop because let somebody else deal with them.
Mm-hmm.
The first two, the Ravens wide receivers, Rashad Bateman and Odell Beckham Jr., we're just not seeing enough passing volume in that offense to support multiple, I talked about Nelson Aguilar as the third wide receiver, but even then, it's Odell I just have on the list due to the fact that he already can't seem to stay healthy. And that's just not something that I want to go back and forth with through the year. Like, is he going to be this week? Is he going to go this week? Kind of the same with Rashad Bateman. They have trouble staying on the field, and the targets are already starting to go in other ways. So it's like they're going to come back. They're not going to take away targets from guys that are already developing rapport with the quarterback. And that's just my opinion on that. Kadarius Toney's the next one. Just too volatile in an offense that's willing to throw the ball to too many people. Matt Breida, Josh Kelly for running backs. Josh Kelly can't get it done. He can't. He's not capable. He got 12 yards on 11 rushes last week against the Minnesota Vikings, and that is putrid. He's gone. Matt Breida is just, I don't know when Saquon Barkley's coming back, and I've never at any point that he's been a Giants backup have seen like too much. I mean, he's had a couple of good games, but I just don't think he's gonna be a guy that can get it done. If you absolutely like, if you're a Saquon manager and Saquon doesn't go this week, you have no other options. Keep him rostered. Starting him is something I'm very iffy about. Like I said, he's someone I drop. Along with any Saints running back that is not named Alvin Kamara,
Yep.
because Tony Jones is done. Kendrick Miller's not done. You can hold on to him just because he's a rookie and has got a good talent profile. But Alvin's going to, especially like, Jamal's on IR right now. Alvin come in. He's the guy they know. Alvin's going to take over everything there. And the last two for me are Darnell Mooney, just because Fields isn't getting it done passing. And the only one who is getting any kind of volume worth keeping on your team is DJ Moore.
Mm-hmm.
So Mooney and even like Komet, I'm moving on from. And finally, AJ Dillon. I'm solid standing by this. AJ Dillon, I'm dropping in any play. It's just so irritating how you can get so much, like him and Josh Kelly, you can get so much opportunity and just do nothing with it. Like he got 11 carries for 33 yards. Yeah, it's better than Josh Kelly, but what's that saying? It's just
Yeah.
you're getting benched for these no-name. I just don't understand it. I thought AJ Dillon was a much better player, but after last year, the whole thing we saw, like, oh, it's going to be a 1-2 punch, and AJ Dillon just doesn't do shit. I didn't draft him anywhere this year. And then it was like, oh, Aaron Jones is going to miss some time. So, and he still is just not doing anything. Didn't even get a single target.
Mm-hmm.
That you just don't want that. So he's someone I'm completely fine with dropping. I'm not touching.
Yeah, and I think the big point of these drop now guys, when you're looking at guys like Kadarius Toney, you'll hear everyone talk about how talented this guy is, what he can do. This is his ceiling. It's not worth holding a roster spot for guys that you're wondering if they're ever even going to hit this ceiling. When there's options, when there's a Josh Palmer becoming available, players like that, sure, Kadarius Toney could be more talented, but it's not translating. It's just not. And the longer you hold on to these guys, the less options you're going to have on the waiver. And it's, if I'm a Kadarius Toney owner, which I was, and I already dropped him, if I drop Kadarius Toney and someone else picks him up, in week 12, Kadarius Toney catches 2 touchdowns for 20-something points, I'm not going to be upset about it. Because
No,
before
not at
that,
all.
he's not going to do anything, and you're just holding a roster spot for a guy that just doesn't produce. And at some point, you have to make that decision. Okay, I drafted this guy in the 9th round. It sucks. But he sucks. So let him go. Don't just keep holding on to it.
Yeah, and these are the type of players that I hate more than anything in fantasy football because, yes, they are boom bust, but they like, I swear, it's like you'll bench them, they'll go off, and then you put them in, they get 0 point.
Mm-hmm.
Kadarius Toney got 0.9 points last week.
Yep.
That's just the type of, they're so volatile that the floor is lava. Literally,
Yeah.
like the floor is hell. Is a goose egg. It's not like Gabe Davis where it's like, yeah, we got a 5-point floor. No, the floor is nothing. And
Yep.
I can't sit here and tell anybody like, yeah, that's worth, especially if you're in a more shallow league. And it's like you said, you're missing opportunities every week. Every week you're like, well, I really like this guy. Let somebody else worry about that. Let somebody else make that decision every week on their roster. Do I want to start Sky Moore or do I want to? No, you don't. You really don't. Just let it go, guys.
Yeah.
That's all we
Absolutely.
got for the waivers this week. And
Yeah. So ending the waivers, it'll take us to our last section, which is the injury report. This is in no particular order. I'm going to try to name kind of the bigger name guys first, then we can trickle down from there. The first one, I mean, yeah, Mike Williams, I'm sure everyone knows he's out for the season. Torn ACL. Terrible to see. He'd been having a really productive year to start. Um, but with Mike Williams
Coming off
going
a
down,
monster game too.
yeah, that's what opens the door for Palmer. That's what opens the door for Quentin Johnston, and these guys are more than likely available. So be on the lookout for them. Um, Debo Samuel is considered day to day due to a rib injury. He was not at practice on Monday, so that's something worth monitoring. Knowing how tough Debo is, I'd say he's probably going to play, but again, later on in the week, we'll see. Um, Taking us to Christian Watson. The Packers didn't have a practice Monday, but when they submitted their estimate injury report, they would have listed him as a non participant. I saw Christian Watson said that he plans to play Thursday, but again, like we said before, plenty of times players will say, I'm going to play, I want to play, and they don't. I don't think it's a good sign that, the Packers came out and said if we did hold a practice, he wouldn't play. So I assume later today, Wednesday, we'll probably have a better feeling. But if you're a Christian Watson owner, I mean, they play Thursday, not too much time. So we'll see how it goes with him. Um, Brandon Ayuk and Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones, obviously, Packers didn't have a practice, but they would have listed him as limited, which is a good sign. If he would have been a limited participant, he's another guy. Thursday night game you keep an eye on, but it does at least seem like Aaron Jones is trending towards playing. Brandon Ayuk logged a limited practice. That's a good sign this early in the week. So again, that does seem like Ayuk would be trending towards playing. Um, Jamal Williams, if you hadn't seen, he's been placed on the IR with a hamstring injury. So that means when Alvin Kamara comes back, like we were saying earlier, Tony Jones is not the answer. Kendre Miller doesn't look ready to have a significant workload and actually be productive in that. So
Kamara's back this week.
yeah, Kamara is back. The only scary part about Kamara coming back this week is segueing to the next injury, Derek Carr with a shoulder injury. It's AC sprain, considered week to week. Derek Carr is he's the drop off merchant. So Alvin Kamara with Derek Carr fantasy wise would probably benefit more than he will with Jameis. But again, Alvin Kamara is back. You're starting Alvin Kamara.
We're rolling
Yeah,
on.
you're rolling Alvin no matter what. But Derek Carr is week to week with an AC sprain. Um, the other quarterback we have in this the injury list is Jimmy Garoppolo. He's in concussion protocol. He did play the whole game after hitting his head. Um, so that was a good sign, but he's in the concussion protocol. Something to keep note of. If he is good to go, Devontae Adams, Jacoby Myers going to have monster games. If he's not good to go, and if, as a Raider fan, I'm going to pray that we throw out Aiden O'Connell and not Brian Hoyer. If it's Brian Hoyer, you obviously still start Devontae no matter what. Jacoby Myers, I would start him as well at this point. They seem like the only two real targets, but they will benefit more from Aiden O'Connell out there than Brian Hoyer if Jimmy does have to miss this week. Jonathan Mingo is out with a concussion. He will almost definitely be out this coming week with that concussion. So Adam Thielen, that just throws even more on his plate. Jonathan Mingo is one of the other only real targets there for them. Gus Edwards, the same thing, also ruled out with a concussion.
Yeah.
It's looking like he is going to miss this coming week as well. Justice Hill is
like we don't have an injury or an injury update on Bryce Young yet either, so that's something to still monitor.
Yeah, monitor Bryce Young, because if it's Andy Dalton, he does seem to like Thielen even more. But yeah, Justice Hill, he's another questionable guy. If he does go, he will for sure be the starter for Baltimore. If he does not, take out a quarter and flip it for if it's going to be a Kenyon Drake or a Melvin Gordon week, because honestly, who knows?
Yeah, only relevant to my fellow Ravens fans. Tylan Wallace was placed on IR. If you're not a Ravens fan, that will not mean anything to you.
And the last thing, also relevant to Ravens fans, Rashad Bateman. It was a re-injury of his hamstring. That's what pulled him
Okay.
out of the game. And that's been the concern with Rashad Bateman. He has the talent, but can he stay healthy? And again, like Schiff was mentioning, this just helps a Zay Flowers, a Mark Andrews. If Odell's still out, now you're down Odell and Rashad. So maybe Nelson Aguilar in a deeper league is becoming a play, at least as a pickup. Um, but yeah, that's all the notable injuries that I've seen for this week. Um, Obviously, we'll have better updates as the week goes on. This week just finished, so teams are really just ruling everything questionable. You're not going to know if guys are out for certain this early in the week, but we figured we'd give you guys an update on all of those.
Yeah, still nothing on Zay Jones either.
Yeah, Zay Jones is another one. I'm
Still
sure
nothing.
we'll have our upload come out. We're gonna do another episode tomorrow, and we'll do an episode Friday. Um, so we'll probably have a better update for the Thursday night. If Christian Watson, guys like that are gonna play, but Friday we should at least have a better update for what guys are trending towards playing Sunday and what guys aren't.
Yeah, and then any information that we don't get in the episodes, we'll keep you guys updated on our Instagram page. So, we'll try to get you everything we see throughout the week before, the games end up being played. But if you guys have any start-sit questions, go ahead, leave those in the comments. Any questions you guys have at all, we're here for you any time of the day.
Yep. Until next time, guys.
Yep. Take more reps with the first team tomorrow.
Yes, sir.